This past year has been a difficult one for the world, for the church, and even for our little diocese of Duluth. It seemed as though we could finally begin to heal from the scandals of abuse and bankruptcy when suddenly our beloved bishop was taken from us. As we grieved his loss and awaited an announcement of a new shepherd, a plague suddenly descended upon us like a lightning bolt. Questions, lockdowns, illness, death, and fear fell upon us in quick order. Can you believe that it has been 2 years since we could gather during Holy Week and Easter? Then just when we thought things were getting better, an announcement of a bishop, a summer of lessening illness, these two became dashed hopes in the fall. Just a couple of weeks ago, we passed the 1-year anniversary of the complete shutdown, not only of masses, but it seemed of all of our society. Praise God that we can still come to Mass, but with limits, with masks and sanitizers. You all know the drill. So many of our Protestant brothers and sisters still don't come together to worship in person. With all of that, many stories have been written about the long-term effect this may have on people's personal involvement with faith. We know how devastating it has been on the mental health of so many people of so many ages. Even while vaccines increase, we hear of COVID variants and surges. Frankly, for me, it has felt dreary and depressing and dark. But this is where the message of Easter, the fact of the Lord's resurrection, actually helps us. Something that I guess I knew all of my life, but never quite noticed as much as this year, is that the main event of the Lord's rising takes place when it is still dark. Maybe I've noticed it more because this past Good Friday, just yesterday evening, we celebrated a Tenebrae service where we experienced the growing darkness that came with the death of Jesus. If you've ever read the Gospel of John, you will notice that most evil things take place in the dark, such as Jesus' betrayal by Judas, or Peter's denial, or of course, the arrest of Jesus at Gethsemane. But the greatest thing to happen to the human race, the Lord's resurrection, happens in darkness. Look at the early events on the day of the Lord's rising, and you will see that they take place before the sun rises. Whether it is Mary Magdalene coming to the tomb, or even the women coming to bring spices to anoint Jesus' body, they come either before the sun's rising or perhaps just as it is rising. But in all of the cases, it seems the Lord's resurrection had already taken place while the earth slept in darkness. Think of it. In the darkness, the hope of new life dawns. Jesus was buried at sunset as darkness was once again creeping over the earth, to all appearances a victim and a failure. But on the third day, by the time the sun rose up, he had been raised, victorious, triumphant, and alive. The words of the Exultet, sang so well by Father Matt this evening, expresses this truth. The sanctifying power of this night dispels wickedness, washes faults away, restores innocence to the fallen, and joy to mourners, drives out hatred, fosters concord, and brings down the mighty. Our celebration of Easter reminds us that the darkness of evil and hatred will never ever have the last word. The resurrection of Jesus proclaims the ultimate triumph of light over darkness, goodness over evil within our own individual lives and within our entire human family. Pope Benedict, back in 2006, wrote an encyclical called Deus Caritas Est, which is God is love. Here is what he said in it. Being a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but the encounter with an event, a person, which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. It is this person, the Lord of light and life, that we encounter today. And he is asking us, begging us, commanding us to a very decisive direction, to turn from sin and follow in his way. The risen Lord is asking us to leave behind the works of darkness, to renounce and reject anything and everything in our lives which is dark, sinister, and evil, and to walk always as children of the light. Today, just like in the early church, when the forces of darkness seem like they might overwhelm us, we desperately need courageous and fervent witnesses of Jesus Christ, our crucified and risen Lord. And so, my dear friends, I have to say, I am more hopeful than ever this night. Despite the challenges that we face, despite the darkness that at times seems to envelop us, despite the immense work that lies ahead, I do not fear the future, and neither should you. The Lord that brought light to a very dark world, that drew life from the jaws of death, brings the brightest light of his presence and love to each of us this day. The powers of darkness have never, ever been able to win against Christ's powerful light. There is nothing to fear, because as Jesus Christ told St. Peter, the gates of hell shall not prevail against this, his church. One final thought. Quite often, there are plenty of people who have, throughout history, predicted the demise of the church, and there seem to be plenty of them in the world these days. And yet, that despite the folly of our own sins, and yes, there are plenty of them, there is no more powerful sign of hope for me than those who have chosen quite deliberatively to become Catholics this Easter and to follow the way of the risen Lord, to be beacons of light in the darkness that seems to develop the world. They give me great hope and always challenge me to seek more holiness in my own life. Did you know that those entering the Catholic Church this year here in Duluth are part of a group in the United States that is tens of thousands strong? In the midst of a pandemic, tens of thousands strong. In this crazy time, thousands of men and women are becoming new Catholics in the U.S. alone. The church, my friends, is blessed indeed. Despite our own folly, Jesus invites, and through each new soul added to the flock, the church is renewed once again. My dear friends, Easter has come. Light has indeed cast out darkness. Christ has risen and has conquered sin and death.